didn't feel like I was taken seriously. I still don't.
As a parent, it's really hard not to feel that you've really failed.
6 months from then I might not have been alive, so what was the point, kind of thing?
I got iller and iller
Everyone sort of kept telling me
until I wanted to die.
It's much easier for people to put
happy.
somebody else's box and separate it from everyone else. That, let it be that. Please don't let him be dead.
You can't stumble upon it. It's somewhere that I suppose people come on holiday in the summer, but in the winter it's quiet. I live in this tiny village with no street lights. My neighbours are fields and a funeral home. One of my uni friends just came to stay, and they said they're from the middle of nowhere, and then as soon as they got to where I lived, they said, no, I take it all back. You're from the middle of nowhere.
I moved up here from North London when I was about 14.
My daughter prefers to live in Norfolk. She likes the open spaces, she likes the peace and quiet. And when we do go back to Essex, she always says to me, I'm so glad I live in Norfolk now.
When you're a kid, you think it's a bit boring. Then you travel away and you find other places in the UK and you find other places in the world, and you actually realise it's a really special corner of the planet.
I've lived in Norfolk my whole life.
I've lived around the area for most of my life.
I love it. In my opinion, the best place to grow up.
Favourite place in Norfolk? I would probably say Norwich city centre, because it's got absolutely everything. Shopping, historic walks, culture, it's just so different.
I think my favourite place in Norfolk has to be the beaches. I've been going to that beach since I was 7 years old. It was the only place I could really forget about my anxieties.
Yeah, it's got a sort of a nostalgia to it that I love. I was a chubby child. I love food. I can associate memories from my childhood because I'll remember food I was eating at the time. So Mum would be like, oh, do you remember the holiday in wherever? And I'll be like, oh yeah, we ate. She's like, it's so weird that that's the way your mind works. I was just so obsessed with baking. I was always on my phone looking at baking recipes, or I was looking at the calorie content of things. So it was like this paradox of being obsessed with food but also being so afraid of it. I was so unwell that I thought I was absorbing calories by touching the food. I was wearing gloves as I baked. This complete, the insanity of it, that is wanting to provide food for everyone else and wanting to cook, but literally it being almost your biggest fear. Because most anorexics are completely obsessed with food.
Anorexia nervosa is essentially an eating disorder that's defined by restrictive patterns of eating. I'm sure in part it is about a body image type thing, but most of the time it's far more than that. People who suffer it will have quite perfectionist tendencies, OCD, and particularly depression.
The symptom is not eating. Anorexia has so many parallels with other illnesses. It's just there's a weight loss that comes with it.
I've been asked so many times, how does my anxiety manifest itself? And people say sort of, do you get sweaty or do you get the shakes? And all I can say is like somebody's built a brick wall in front of my face. I can't go out and do anything, I can't see anybody. And you get more and more frustrated, and then that just makes you tired and anxious. It's an endless cycle of anxiety, and then you're depressed because you're anxious.
When your anxiety gets quite bad, you can start manifesting things. So I have quite a big phobia of cancer. Whenever I start thinking about it, I start feeling the symptoms. I've bled from anxiety before. You start doubting, is this real or is it my head?
My daughter is currently 17 years old. The difference between her autism and her mental health difficulties is really hard to tease out. She finds it really hard to understand why she's feeling so bad about herself.
People don't instantly put like being a musician and having some sort of anxiety. If I'm getting nervous and anxious before a big performance in front of lots of people, it's giving me adrenaline and it's almost creating some sort of excitement as well.
It's anxiety, but you know exactly where it's coming from.
Yeah. So
You have this event that's happening, which is why you're anxious, you're working up to it, and you go and do it.
And you can see it through as well, because you
Yeah.
come out of the other side without it. And that's a very different anxious to being in some sort of social situation where I suddenly become very introverted and might separate myself entirely. And it's hard to move on from it.
To be honest, I thought anxiety just didn't exist. I didn't think that they couldn't do something just because of what it was saying in their head rather than sort of a physical implication. I didn't understand it till I got it.
It was just about feeling sadness and just being overwhelmed with sadness. I tried to talk about it with a couple of my male friends at school, and they just had no concept at all of what I was talking about. And it just made me feel like I was weird and I was crazy for feeling that way, you know? I also had people who I was friends with who experienced mental health but who went through really traumatic experiences. But it's like, I can't talk about my mental health to you because you have a real reason to feel this way. You know, it kind of belittles what you've gone through.
I think it's a lot of different factors. I think it's environmental. Some people would say that it's a chemical imbalance, maybe genetically disposed to it. I don't have like one thing that I would pinpoint it to and be like, that is the reason that I am sad.
A lot of the time people tout a lack of control as a reason for developing anorexia. Being so controlled in one area of your life, i.e. controlling your food, can sometimes kind of make up for a total loss of control somewhere else.
It's also a massive numbing agent. So if you are someone who's in emotional pain, or you've grown up around situations that have made you sad and you've not had an outlet for that, when you're underweight you don't feel anything. I cut off all emotions because starving yourself does that. The person I was when I was deeply in my anorexia is nothing like the person who I actually am.
When I was a kid, I was pretty happy, everything was pretty normal, like we didn't have any sort of trauma or anything. And then I hit sort of being a teenager and started asking all those big questions like, who am I, what's it all about, why are we here, that sort of stuff. That was when I sort of started to, I don't know, struggle with it a little bit.
I was sort of a chubby, anxious 10-year-old, and then started high school and sort of everything just went at a million miles per hour. I lost a lot of weight.
I moved away from home to university. I went to Exeter, so kind of as far away from Norwich as I could get, which felt like a great idea at the time. Living away from home, cooking for yourself. It had got to the point where I was kind of controlling what I was eating a lot. By the end of the summer, I'd lost enough weight that my mum was worried enough to talk to me about it. We decided that it was best for me to stop university at that point and come home.
I was at university and I'd had a hard time at home with like a parental divorce and a messy one, and finally when I left home I had time to think, and that time sort of messed me up basically. I dropped out of university and I came home. I thought that would make everything better, and it didn't. I struggled to leave my room, putting the dishwasher on became an impossible task. It was just so frustrating and I just didn't understand any of it.
I felt helpless and sad.
I thought it was me being lazy.
I'd kind of forgotten what happiness was.
Everybody who is on the autistic spectrum is different. With my daughter, she really struggles socially. She struggles to make and maintain friendships. When she is frustrated, she will become extremely violent. She has self-harm. She has been suicidal. She always feels terrible about it.
I had massive expectations about what my life would be, and I wanted to, well, still do want to change the world. At that point in my life, I thought, if my life is leading to failure, why don't I just cut it short and end it? Me being depressed for my whole life and not really giving much back, leeching off people, why not just end it? And I tried to kill myself. Thank God it didn't work. I'm sort of bad at that too. I spent 24 hours in A&E and got admitted to Helston Hospital for 3 months. In a mental health hospital, people want to kill themselves and people want to get out. I suppose in any other walk of life, an alarm going off for someone trying to kill themselves is pretty shocking. But when it happens every couple of hours or so, you get really used to it.
I was referred to CAMS. CAMS is the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service. The Norfolk CAMS service was horrendous. Considering I was 11 years old, we needed to treat the anorexia, but I was also a child. This specific woman, she was just no empathy. She was almost telling me off for having an eating disorder. Do you know what you're doing to yourself? Do you know what you're doing to your family? She was being angry at me for not wanting to be okay and wanting to be normal.
I was diagnosed with celiac, which obviously means there's a lot of foods that I can't eat, so I can't eat gluten or wheat. They gave me just an A4 sheet of paper discussing kind of meal plans and how you go about eating enough food. A lot of the things that were on there were things like sandwiches, biscuits, bread, pasta, fish and chips, KFC, all of which are precluded if you've got celiac disease.
Beds were a competitive element of it. People were being pushed out who weren't ready to face the world, who were really, really ill. They didn't have my mum to fight in the corner. They didn't have any family that could have looked after them. So they were almost bundled out to society.
The service was so bad in Norfolk that my mum uprooted us to Brighton. As soon as I got to Brighton, I was put into hospital. Started off on small portions, medium portions, then regular portions. I also was fitted with a nasogastric tube. The calories were going to go in one way or another. They got it, they understood it, they had empathy, but they also pushed me. We literally stayed in Brighton just to get me treatment and came back to Norfolk afterwards.
Trying to find support in Norfolk is quite difficult.
It was 5 years before the NHS actually offered to help me, which, saying that seems so ridiculous.
There is no autism services available in Norfolk.
Every week it was pushing and pushing for me to leave.
BMI stands for body mass index, and anything below 15 is life-threatening. I dropped from 16.5 to just under 13, which is a shocking amount of weight to lose while you're seeing a therapist weekly.
I did try and seek help, and this is the hard part. I went to 80 St Stephen Street on the 19th of October 2017 because I was feeling really suicidal. Told my work about it, that I was going through some stuff and I needed the afternoon off to go and see these people. I don't care whether I take it on holiday or not. So I took the afternoon off, went to see them, and then came back to work and got fired. It was my mum's birthday, and I didn't tell her because I didn't want to ruin her birthday. That was a pretty painful day. I was urgently referred to this wellbeing service. I thought, okay, fine, at least I'll get to see someone soon, or at least hear back soon. It took a month for them to tell me that it's not going to be until the 23rd of February until I can speak to someone, which was 5 months. I spoke to someone at the wellbeing service, went through exactly the same questions. At the end of it, they said, right, okay, so these are the different things that we've got. Which one do you think would be most beneficial? I just said, well, definitely one of the counselling ones. She was like, right, well, that's an 8-month wait. And I was like, I've already waited 5 months just to speak to you. So it was just like, it was unbelievable.
Despite me telling them that I'd tried to commit suicide on various occasions, they told me there was a 6-month waiting list minimum. 6 months from then I might not have been alive, so what was the point?
I ran away from home with the intention of ending my life.
Because of my father's death, I ended up trying to take my own life.
I was really scared. I called my mum, I told her where I was, and then she rang the police.
The paramedics didn't treat me like I was an emergency. I felt just very, very embarrassed at the time. I remember waiting to be booked in and almost throwing up everywhere and shivering. They took one look at me, asked me if I had tried to kill myself over a boy.
Rang my doctor, they were like, are you at risk? I was like, yep.
So needless to say, I avoided help for a little while. It took me a lot before I had the confidence to go back. It was the first time I was introduced to the wellbeing, and I think I was waiting over a year for a phone call.
They said that they'd made a referral to CAMS because I was 16, and they kept saying, we've put a referral in, we've put a referral in, we've put a referral in. And then I turned 18 and I just literally heard nothing, and they said, oh, well, we'll move you to adult services now, and because you're new to adult services, you can go to the bottom of the list.
I have 3 siblings who were all really struggling with being in Brighton. They really enjoyed our high school. So my mum was like, right, we prioritised the best treatment you can, but we need to go back now for your siblings. And I just was beside myself. I was like, I'm not going back there. We came back. The first session I had was for OCD. She was really great. And then went in to see my eating disorder specialist, who I was meeting, and she went, by the way, you won't be having that therapist you saw for your OCD. She's become unavailable or something like that, and just being like, here we go.
They saw me lose weight, but continue to work in the same way. It's hard to make mental changes until you're physically able to do that, particularly if you've been waiting around for a few months in a city without very much to do, if you don't have a job. It doesn't feel there's very much point.
I started speaking with the people at the wellbeing service. They are working tirelessly, and a lot of them are quite emotionally drained. They find it really frustrating as well.
My daughter would have a crisis. We would then go to the GP. The GP would refer us to mental health services. Mental health services would say they couldn't social services fit the criteria for help. Crisis, and when she would become violently to mental health services, she was admitted to hospital for her own protection. So we were constantly going round in this circle where every agency was saying to us, oh, we know all about your daughter, we know your daughter is having all these difficulties, but nobody was giving us any help. And that went on for 6 years.
I felt so deflated and defeated.
I closed my case with them for them helping me out against their advice, and just said I'd sort of sort it out by myself.
So I just let it go, and I went without the help because it had been so long, and I think I was just too tired.
The emergency assessment, bearing in mind that she had tried to kill herself, was in 5 days. We had an assessment with the head of service. I then had to tell the whole story of everything we had been through once again. It was so frustrating that she didn't have the notes from previous assessments. She said to me, your story is horrific, I think you should write a book. How on earth have I got the time and the energy to write a book? She then wrote me a letter, and the letter said, I'm sorry that your daughter is having to go through all these horrendous things, but we are only commissioned to provide services for mental health. Your daughter has autism, we cannot help you.
My dad didn't turn up to work one day. I didn't know what was going on. My dad asked my mum to promise him not to tell us kids because he was worried about our well-being and how we would feel. This time round, at 5 p.m, he did come home. He did call the crisis team. He said he was going to act on his failed attempt. And they said, sorry, we can't help you. We can't find your notes. Less than a week later, he went missing. And he didn't come home. It was that worst case scenario.
I took an overdose. My mum came to check on me and saw that there were packets of stuff on the floor. And she just got really upset. I'm sat in a really loud waiting room with people who've broken their arm, there's drunk people. I kept falling in and out of sleep. I didn't know what to do. They asked me what I'd taken, put a thing in my arm, and just monitored me for 24 hours. They then discharged me. They said, I can go on a waiting list for therapy, but they have to discharge me from the crisis team. I can't be with one service and wait for another. I started experiencing mood swings, and I didn't really understand why. The doctor, he said, oh, that sounds a bit like bipolar. I'll refer you to something a bit more serious, something called Tier 3. in the October, I got a phone call based off of me talking to my GP in April. She didn't have access to my notes, so we had to reschedule the phone conversation, which took 2 months. In December, and said, okay, I think there was a problem with your notes last time, but we've got it now, and based on what you've said, I think you need help. They said it is not severe enough for our tier, so they referred me to tier 2. They contacted me in January, said somebody will contact you in the next couple of weeks. February, nothing. March, nothing. Eventually somebody texted me and said, hello, my name is blah blah blah, I'm from Community Youth Service. I would have been contacted in January, but the person who referred me didn't do it properly.
Crisis had lost its notes. I remember feeling so angry because I thought, even if you'd lost the notes, if someone says that they're going to try and end their life again, why would you just send them away or hang up? In reading his record, there's endless papers from 1996 where he's visiting doctors. His mental health's there. While it's no one's fault at all, you can't blame any one person, but there were definitely failings in the system. If the NHS gave him better help, if the crisis team were there for him when he needed them, maybe things would be different. But I don't get to know that.
He was in his room and I was downstairs, and he texted me and said, I'm really struggling and I found really bad ways to deal with it, and I don't know what to do anymore. Being a typical mum, I obviously went upstairs and laid on the bed with him, and he was so upset and just cried and cried. But he wouldn't really tell me what it was. He said that something had happened and he just hadn't been able to get past it, and that he'd been feeling bad for the last couple of years, but it just got worse. I know for Joe it was a massive thing to disclose this. So I took him to the GP, and the GP said, you know, you're 18, you are depressed. I'm not prepared to prescribe you any antidepressants because of the risk of suicidal ideation increases. I could just see that he was becoming more withdrawn, so we found a private clinical psychologist.
When I became friends with Joe, we had a sort of wicked, evil sense of humour. It was dry, but there's a lot of healing to be found in laughing about the stuff you've been through. He messaged me whilst I was away about the therapy, being like, I'm not doing very well. Our big group went on a night out, and Joe and I just spent the whole night like sat in a corner, and him basically saying, I am in unbearable pain.
I've always been one of those parents who's always tried to be really open and honest with my children. We would talk about things like suicide, and I remember saying to him, you have to tell me if you ever feel that bad. If you die, you'll kill me.
I knew a friend that could get hold of dihydrocodeine, so I bought a tray of them and ate all of them.
I had a penknife with me. I just started like slicing into my arm.
One day I just went and down to the forest and took a rope. Luckily the only branch I could find was too thick to tie the rope around, didn't have enough rope left.
A couple of minutes of hanging, the noose broke. By that point I realised that I needed help.
I thought, I'm actually not accepting what the GP's saying, we're going back. And this time we saw a really lovely, compassionate lady, prescribed him really low dose antidepressants. Joe came out of the GP like a different person. Someone had actually believed him, like he'd been validated, like, yeah, you are really unwell. He seemed to have more energy.
He tidied up his room. He'd written this like to-do list of the things he was going to do, like come see me in Bristol, and he was so much better than he'd been in so long.
I really felt that things were starting to improve. At the end of November, I had to go away to uni. Joe was at home with his older brother and my partner, who was working. He'd been seen the day before, but on the Tuesday, he'd not been seen in the morning, which wasn't unusual for him.
Joe, like most teenagers and like most mentally ill people, was very sporadic with his communication. Like, you would sometimes not hear from him for days on end, and he'd been doing so well for sort of the last couple of weeks. If anything, I was like, don't worry, like, he's good.
I came home and found that Joe had taken his life. I don't really know what to say about that. That is, it's probably the worst day of my life. I don't think there's anything in life that can prepare you for that. See your child chatting and laughing, and you come home and they're dead. Joe left no note. He didn't tell anyone. And I think that's the hardest part of it, is the not knowing. And the kind of survivor guilt of re-examining what you did or what you maybe didn't do.
I didn't have any perspective at all. I was just in a place of complete pain and sadness. I just wanted it to end.
As humans, our brains look for the quickest solution to a problem.
It's a big misconception with mental illness that we want attention when actually a lot of the time is spent thinking of other people.
I think he thought he was setting us free.
You know, Joe was my baby. As a parent, it's really hard not to feel that you've really failed. My main problem is sleep, in that I will get flashbacks often when I'm about to fall asleep from that night. We're at 6 months now since Joe died, and officially you would be classed as having PTSD. I saw the GP a couple of days after because I hadn't slept for 3 days. I remember really clearly being given antidepressants, and I said, I don't need antidepressants. I'm not depressed. My son's killed himself. I'm meant to feel like this. I'm meant to feel devastated. I really needed some help. I had to speak to 3 different GPs in the end. I was told that after a bereavement, the appropriate wait was 8 months.
I had to take a long period of time off work. I then asked for help myself because I was struggling to cope. They referred me to the wellbeing service. They told me to go for a walk. They said, well, why don't you go for a walk? That'll make you feel better.
It's not fun to have a son that wants to kill himself.
Nobody teaches you as a parent. I remember her saying, like, how to deal with this with your child.
Yeah, she's been through a lot, and she's really, really supported me.
People don't ask for help on their own. A lot of the duty of care kind of fell to my mum. If she hadn't taken me to the GP and known to ask for a referral, then I wouldn't have done it myself. The carer, as well as the sufferer, feels and is with you for as much of the illness as you are.
I finally got to see a psychiatrist for an assessment in January of 2019. I had a full assessment with a psychiatrist who diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a waiting list, and they can't tell me how long the waiting list is because there's so many people on it.
In a country that prides itself as being forward-thinking, post-suicide, families are left to get on with it.
What actually triggered me to start gaining weight was a chance encounter in a supermarket with someone I'd never met before. So she'd obviously seen me walking around, kind of checking the nutrition on labels and things. I was obviously underweight, to the point where people would look at me strangely in the street and comment on it. When I was at the checkout with my mum, she came up to me and handed me a note. which basically linked me to her personal blog, which documented her progress through anorexia by using personal training. And for the first time, that was something that I thought I could kind of get behind. The idea of getting stronger and using food to help my body do more things rather than just focusing on what it looks like was a really important aspect of my recovery. I got in touch with her personal trainer, and then the next week we started official sessions. And eventually I started putting on weight.
Sometimes along the way in recovery from mental illness, you get these little bursts of strength. It was a charity called Eating Matters in Norwich, and they were really fantastic. The therapist was better. It basically boils down to that. Being more confident, becoming more Sophie instead of anorexic Sophie, realising like I love drama, like throwing myself into my academia, realising I was good at stuff. They were great. They had the time is the main thing.
This time, the service has been amazing. They gave me the diagnosis of cyclothymia. It's explained as a less severe form of bipolar. He said I don't fit into any box where all of my problems don't stem from trauma or environmentally. There's like lots of different reasons for the way that I am now. It's only in the last couple of months that I've experienced a more caring professional.
I don't think there's a kind of a definitive way to make every person better. I think it's quite individual. Just being able to understand the way I'm feeling more has just helped massively. Being able to talk to other people who might be feeling similar. You were the first person who I met who was sort of feeling something weird for no particular reason.
Part of the thing that needs to be outlined to mentally ill people when they go and ask for help is this is okay, this is an illness, like your brain's doing a very specific thing right now.
When people said you should be happy, you deserve to be happy, it's like, but I'm not, so there must be something wrong with me. And it's like, no, actually, I'm actually pretty normal. It's just part of being a human, which I am.
A charitable organisation eventually contacted me. They said, oh, the difficulty we have is that because your daughter is autistic, she might not engage with us, and if she doesn't engage with us, we can't help her. But there's all these services that can help you, and I was like, oh, please tell me. I said, I've now spent 9 years trying to get help for my daughter, and he said, oh, the Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust. So I feel like just in the last week, I've gone back in a huge circle once again.
It's really frustrating because I don't know who's in control of this situation. Not that I'm looking for somebody to blame, but I just want to look at it constructively and be like, right, how can we sort this out?
It's not just a matter of money and resource, although that is a huge part of it. I think that there needs to be quite a large rethink as to how even the mental health services kind of approach mental health.
Even when you're going through it, you don't really understand it.
They don't know how to help what they don't understand.
If it's just the mentally ill going up and campaigning, we're not going to get hurt. It needs to be everyone taking it seriously, and especially as these suicides are increasing, like Joe's not an anomaly. He's a part of a very distinct trend of young people taking their lives. He was a human being, like he's made of the same stuff that we're all made of. It's the exact same situation that any of us could be in if depression takes over. We all could have made that cool. Everyone takes suicide so seriously, but at the root of suicide is mental illness. Let's not just shed tears when people are killing themselves. Let's take it as seriously as when someone has depression, they could kill themselves. There's just so much education that needs to happen. I want to be heard. Government don't care about it, but they're gonna care. And we will see it happen.
Oh, I Googled nearby bridges today. In unbearable pain to find the place I leave this life. So I walked for miles in the dwindling sun, and I scrambled on up to where the sky. I thought of those young men who made the same plan. Oh, I guess I'll stay.